If you clicked on this video, you're probably wondering how can staying near an MRT be a bad thing? Convenience, amenities, easy travel, what's there not to love? As someone who has stayed both near the MRT and far from it, I can tell you that it's not all upsides. There's some very real downsides that often get overlooked. In this video, we'll go through 3 main problems with staying near the MRT, and this goes beyond just paying a higher price. By the end of this video, you have a better understanding of whether staying near the MRT is truly worth it, or whether you might actually enjoy the less obvious benefits of living just a bit further away. Stay till the end where I'll share why staying near the MRT might actually backfire when you try to sell your condo. The first big problem with staying near the MRT is the hustle and the bustle. If you're near older MRT lines like the East-West line, you know how loud the tracks can get. That's something you have to deal with on a daily basis. But even if you're not right next to the tracks, being near the MRT almost always means more foot traffic, cars, buses, and activity in general. Take the example of Watertown in Punggol. It's right at the heart of the action. MRT, LRT, shopping mall, food, supermarkets, all literally downstairs. Super convenient. But that convenience comes with a price. The bustle. Whether you're heading down to the mall or just opening your window, there's always going to be activity. There's always movement, noise, pollution, right at your footstep. And that can make it truly hard to unwind at home. Compare this to River Isles, which isn't right next to the MRT station. You need to use the LRT or walk a little further. But in exchange, you get a much more serene environment and direct access to the park connector for exercise and fresh air. So it really comes down to the lifestyle and what you value. Do you want to be in the thick of it, or do you value some peace and quiet? The noise and the activity may be a deal breaker for some. But if that's okay for you, that doesn't mean that you're all set yet. In fact, the bigger issue is something that you may not be able to see or hear so easily. Therefore, in order to understand the risk with buying a condo near the MRT, we also need to understand the risk related to the finances. If you're new here, my name is Daryl, and in this channel we talk about real estate in Singapore. If you're interested in the topic of condos and locations, then you may also enjoy some of my other videos, which talks about things like what actually makes a location good, whether it makes more sense to live near the MRT or buy a car instead, and even a full review of the Watertown condo in Punggol, which I'll be talking about again later in this video. So remember to like and subscribe if you want more such unbiased property videos. The second problem with staying near the MRT is the price premium. Units right next to the MRT station often almost always command a higher PSF and price. You may be thinking, but yeah, that's fine if I can afford it, right? But the downside and the risk is that you may end up overpaying compared to some of the other options. Let's go back to the same example in Punggol. At Watertown, a 3-bedder might be asking for around $2 to $2.5 million. Compare that to its counterpart River Isles, slightly further away from the MRT station, where for roughly the same budget, you could get a larger unit or even an extra room. So there's a real trade-off that you may need to make. That means if you're purely focused on convenience, you might end up sacrificing space or an additional room, which could hurt your quality of life in the long run. And here's the bigger issue. When it comes time to sell, you may face stiff competition from units which are further away from the MRT, but much more affordable. Buyers today are smart. They'll compare the different options out there. If your exit is priced too high just because it's near the MRT station, exiting profitably could be a challenge. And that's the tricky part because the MRT premium can feel like a trap, where you end up paying more but risk not getting as much as you paid for. But here's the twist. Despite the high price, people still line up to buy these units. Why? Because everything that makes them expensive is also what makes them so attractive. Therefore, in order to understand the problems with buying a condo near the MRT station, we also need to be fair and talk about what's so good about it. From a lifestyle perspective, the convenience is unbeatable. No long walks, no waiting for buses, just straight access. From an investment perspective, it's also generally easier to rent out or sell, since proximity to MRT is a strong attraction point. The convenience and the investment appeal is real, and for many, that's enough to justify the premium. But here's a catch. Once you've tasted that convenience, it can change the way that you see every other home. And that's where the next problem begins. The third problem is a bit less obvious. It's about over-reliance. If you've gotten used to the convenience of staying near the MRT, it may be hard for you to move further away in the future. Let's say you want to upgrade to a bigger place. If your budget doesn't stretch to another MRT-adjacent condo, you might feel stuck. In that sense, staying near the MRT may spoil you to thinking that that's the only option. Just like how some people who are staying close to the central may find it hard to eventually move further out. Now, some people may say that that's a good problem to have, and actually I agree with that. But it's a small point to consider if you want some flexibility in your next move. So to conclude, staying near the MRT does have its real advantages. Unbeatable convenience, easier rental demand, and usually a stronger exit potential. But it comes with some real problems as well. You have to deal with more noise and bustle. You might end up over-relying on the MRT for convenience, making it harder to accept the alternatives later. And the most important one is you'll be likely paying a higher premium. Sometimes you have to give up size, age, or maybe something you value like an extra room in exchange. At the end of the day, if you don't plan to own a car, then I think yes, paying a premium to stay near the MRT can make sense. It could also save you tens of thousands by avoiding the car ownership cost. But remember to do your homework thoroughly to assess the price disparity between other MRT stations and between units that are further from the MRT in general. You may want to look at both the price and the PSF element to ensure that you're not overpaying for the MRT element. And beyond the location, you also need to look at things like the layout, the age, facilities, and the overall value proposition of the condo. But if you do have the flexibility, then remember this, MRT is only one element when it comes to the location. There are many other fundamental factors that matter just as much. Schools, amenities, the profile of the HDB upgraders in the area, and even the psychological perception of the estate. If you want to understand what are some of the trade-offs that you need to make if you want to stay near the MRT, then you can drop me a message to see whether a condo near the MRT may be best for your family. If you found this video helpful, then you may like my next video, which talks about whether it may make more sense to stay near the MRT station or buy a car instead.